And this is Bruno Luce with GLB Productions coming to you from InfoComm 2017. And I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Tom Danley. Tom, thank you so much for having us. So you've very kindly agreed to answer a few questions. And for those of our audience who are outside the United States and may not be familiar, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Tom Danley. I'm the Director of Research and Development at Danley Sound Labs, and one of the co-founders, along with Mike.
Wonderful. And hence why the name of the company is Danley Sound Labs. All right. Now, before you became a loudspeaker designer, you actually worked at NASA, didn't you?
Well, I worked for a company that built space hardware for NASA, and the area that we were involved in, we used acoustic levitation. That's where you can use very loud sound to support an object in midair. The idea there was that there are a lot of materials like glass and ceramics that if you melt them in a container, that they contaminate the material. So the idea was to build a furnace or processing system that would process and melt the material while it was suspended in midair.
Wonderful. And so after that, you decided to set up Danley Sound Labs. And can you tell us how that came into being?
Well, I've been interested in loudspeakers and sound since childhood, and I actually had several attempts at the loudspeaker business previously.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
And that's actually partly how I got involved with intersonics was using the acoustic levitation. And I designed some of the transducers that we used for that early on. And I had been there for almost 18 years.
My goodness.
Yeah, it was an interesting job.
And that was through the 90s, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the end was because of the shuttle disaster that kind of
Challenger.
Yeah, that ended our business.
All right. So come the early 2000s, that's when the whole genesis of Danley comes about, isn't that?
Yes. Mike actually was a customer for the Intersonics, the company we had before, and when that went out of business, I thought I would try and license inventions, but then Mike called and asked if I wanted to start a speaker business, and I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds good.
And this is the one where we see him saying in the video, if Thomas Edison asks you to build light bulbs, you just say yes, right?
Well, yeah.
Wonderful. And so you set up Danley Sound Labs in 2005, and it's been a wonderful journey since then.
Yes.
Right. So could you say a little bit about what makes your products unique?
Well, I guess if you were to distill it down to one thing, the object of the synergy horns is to use multiple drivers that combine together and radiate as if there was only one driver in the cabinet. And some of the boxes we make have a large number of drivers, but they all radiate as if they only had one.
And why do you think nobody has thought about this up to this point?
That's a good question. I'm not sure why this wasn't addressed before now.
Yeah, because you've always had horns, right, from the beginning of sound reinforcement. And, people have always thought that you in order to make things louder, you put lots of horns together. But nobody seems to have hit on the idea of putting multiple drivers into one big horn. Yeah. To your knowledge, has the synergy horn concept ever been attempted before your cabinets?
Not in the way we're doing it at all. No. It was a completely new thing, and in the beginning we weren't even sure if it would catch on because it's so different.
Right. And so you had a number of prototypes that you went through before you came to the synergy horn idea.
Yes, the idea for it actually came out of an old Synodcon class. I remembered something that Don Davis had said, and this was about 12 years later that I remembered it, and it sort of made me think about, okay, well, maybe there's a different explanation and a different approach. And after two or three prototypes experimenting, it seemed like there was maybe a path to a design.
Can you remember what it was that Don said?
Yes, he was talking about conical horns. He said they have very good directivity, pattern control, but they have poor low-frequency loading. And that was the thing that stuck in my mind, because horns have a high-pass corner to their impedance transformation, and that's based on how fast the area in the horn expands. And it occurred to me that in the conical horn, the expansion was initially very rapid, but it slowed down as you moved away from the apex, which would make it more suitable for lower frequencies. Right. And that's why in the current stuff, the low-frequency drivers are furthest forward, where the expansion rate is slow. The mids are in a higher place, and then at the very end, where it's rapid, it's the high frequencies.
All right. So moving on from there, could you say a little bit about what makes your products unique?
Well, the fact that they radiate as a single source means that they don't produce a pattern of lobes and nulls like multiple sources do. And in a place like a room where you want to have intelligibility, the directivity is very important, and having lobes pointed off in other directions is not a good thing.
Right. So in the practical application, what can your products do that competitors' products don't do so well?
Well, for one thing, the way they sound doesn't change appreciably with distance. They get quieter as you move away, but the sound character doesn't change very much. And the other thing is that they're able to confine a lot more of the energy to within a desired angle. And especially in rooms or sports stadiums where a lot of our stuff goes, that's very important.
Right.
It sort of governs the intelligibility and musical articulation.
Right. So especially in rooms that are reverberant, rooms that have a lot of hard surfaces, these are excellent applications.
Yes, and in fact, there's a thing called the Hopkins-Stryker rule that it defines what you need to have intelligibility, and you want to reduce the number of sources as much as possible, and you want to increase the directivity of them as much as possible. And that's the direction that our products have gone.
Yeah, and I've seen and heard sound systems where the sound actually improves when you turn the system off, which is quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of sad, actually.
And this has been something which you've managed to actually sell people on the systems just through a simple A/B comparison.
Yes, in fact, most of the early sales in the stadiums were a direct result of setting up a system next to the line arrays or other kinds of arrays.
Right.
And letting the customer hear, okay, this is what could be, this is what you have.
Absolutely. So why are line arrays so popular?
Well, you have a large number of companies marketing them.
Indeed.
And it isn't because of the sound quality. And I, being a little bit cynical, on the other hand, there really wasn't a solution that solved this before, so I shouldn't diss them too much, because what else could they do?
Right. Thank you. So right now, we've seen some new products from you this year where you've managed to actually package the Synergy horn concept into smaller and smaller enclosures.
Yes, we go trying to make things smaller and more powerful, and it's the more powerful end of things that seems to be where the attraction to the market is.
Right. And does this reduction in size come with a trade-off? I remember Doug Jones saying that, when it comes to sound, size is important because you can't change the wavelength of what you're dealing with.
Right. You have to live within the boundaries, and if it's executed properly, there's really no ill effect from increasing the number of drivers, assuming you follow the rules that allow them to combine. The only thing you'd lose with a smaller enclosure is the frequency that you lose pattern control goes up.
Right.
But,
and one of the early issues with the Synergy horn was the fact that you only had a single high-frequency driver, right?
Yes.
Because of the difficulty of packing but you've now solved that problem.
Yes, that was a big issue too, because in order for regular sources to combine, they have to be less than a quarter wavelength apart. The problem is at 20 kilohertz, the wavelength is about 5/8 of an inch, and so there had to be a different strategy to deal with that.
And you solve that problem now?
Yes, it took a while to get it ironed out. In fact, we keep discovering little wrinkles that allow it to be simpler and simpler.
Right.
Like the J6 in the demo room now is the simplest one of all.
Right, right. And you use the term combiner, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And can you say a little bit about how the new combiner works, if possible?
Well, it'd be pretty hard to describe without having drawings and pictures at the same time. But the idea is that what you're doing is combining several high-frequency drivers in such a way that what radiates as if it came from a single driver that was further back in the horn.
I see. Right. And you can do this without needing them to be within a quarter wavelength of each other.
Under the conditions that this works, yes.
All right, and I think the easiest way for people to see that this does work is by simply listening to the enclosures themselves.
Yes.
All right. And what would you say is the biggest challenge facing the sound reinforcement industry today? You know, we had a wonderful presentation today where we looked at some of the history of the systems, and we looked at the systems that the Beatles used, and we looked at the Grateful Dead systems. Today we have power, right? There's no problem with that. So what do you think is the biggest challenge today?
Boy, this would be just my opinion.
Yes.
You're right. We have no problem getting loud. In fact, loud substitutes for quality a lot of the time. And I, being somewhat old school, what I would like to see is a move back towards the higher fidelity, like in a concert where you could understand the words, for example. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And what do you think the future holds? I mean, you had your 10th anniversary in 2015, so the company is now 12 years old. And what do you think the future holds?
Well, boy, there is sort of a backlog of ideas.
Your ideas?
Well, yeah, from the past. And Doug and I are working on something new as a microphone.
Oh, yes.
And so as far as what the future holds, I have never been good at predicting the future. In fact, when I've thought I knew what was going to happen, there's frequently a left turn around the corner. So, don't know.
Okay, wonderful. And where can people go to find out more about your products?
Well, we're at the show. I should know what our demo room number is, but I don't right offhand.
We'll put it on the screen.
Okay, and our website,
Danley Sound Labs.
Danley Sound Labs, and we have a Facebook page too.
Okay. And finally, for all of those up-and-coming live sound engineers, because most of the people who watch my channel are into live sound, what advice would you have for them?
I would say generally trust your ears, don't get discouraged. Be skeptical of you hearing things that sound impossible, because they very well could be. And just keep at it. It might take you a while, but keep at it.
Wonderful. Tom Danley from Danley Sound Labs, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.